The grand galactic chamber buzzed with anticipation as thousands of alien species gathered for what they believed would be just another routine conquest vote. The air was thick with the murmur of voices, the soft hum of alien languages, and the shifting lights of bioluminescent beings floating above. At the central podium stood Admiral Cator, a towering figure whose crystalline exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber's prismatic lights. His 6 arms, each articulated with perfect biomechanical precision, tapped impatiently against the surface of the podium, a clear sign of his importance and growing impatience as he prepared to speak. The silence in the chamber fell like a heavy curtain, and all eyes turned to the Admiral. With a voice that dripped with artificial gravitas, Cator began. Esteemed members of the Galactic Council, today we gather to address Solar System 3.31, specifically its 3rd planet, Earth. He pronounced the word Earth with a distaste so palpable it seemed to taint the very air around him. The moment the word left his mouth, the chamber erupted in mocking laughter. Species from every corner of the galaxy, their forms as varied as the stars themselves, all laughed at the idea of this primitive species, humans, whose very name had become synonymous with ridicule among the galactic elite. Nearby, BXA, a gelatinous mass of neural tissue suspended in a translucent containment sphere, bobbed in the air, its voice echoing with amusement. The primitive species still fighting over patches of dirt. How charming, BXA chuckled, its floating form pulsating with mockery. Admiral Cator, ever confident, let the laughter simmer before he continued, a wide smile spreading across his face. Our long-range observations show that humans are still struggling to reach their own moon. They waste more time creating entertainment programs about space travel than actually achieving it, he declared, his tone dismissive. The laughter grew louder still, reverberating across the chamber as the assembled species drank in the supposed absurdity of humanity's plight. But Cator wasn't finished. They still think digital watches are impressive, he sneered, his smile widening as the chamber erupted into another round of raucous laughter. But then, Cator's tone shifted, his voice taking on a darker, more commanding edge. But mark my words, these humans have shown concerning patterns of rapid technological advancement. They may be primitive now, but in 50 cycles they could achieve faster than light travel. We must move in now, before they even understand what's happening. His words rang through the chamber like a hammer striking an anvil, drawing a heavy murmur of unease from the representatives. He tapped a button, and a holographic display of Earth's military capabilities flickered to life. The image was crude, showing the planet's outdated weaponry, missiles, chemical rockets, and clumsy satellites. But the data was there, undeniable. A ripple of unease passed through the council members. They had laughed at Earth's primitive technology, but the implications of rapid advancement were beginning to sink in. Tylon, a creature resembling a sea cucumber, its sensory stalks twitching nervously, spoke up. Admiral, they have a disturbing propensity for violence. Their simulations often show them winning alien invasions. Cator laughed again, the sound sharp and dismissive. Should we fear their fictional space wizards and superheroes too? He mocked, the chamber echoing with laughter once again. The irony was not lost on Cator. He relished every chuckle, every sneer from the council, basking in their shared confidence that humanity was no match for the might of the Galactic Council. Cator raised his arms, signaling for silence. His next words cut through the lingering amusement, his voice like ice. I propose we implement Containment Protocol 447. We act now, before they even understand what's happening. One by one, voting indicators across the chamber lit up in green, signaling approval. The motion was unanimous. Green lights flashed across the chamber as the representatives cast their votes in favor of Cater's plan, each one falling into line behind the Admiral's strategy. The AI voice rang out, neutral and cold, confirming the outcome. "Motion carries unanimously," the AI announced. "Containment fleet will deploy within one standard cycle. Admiral Core will oversee operations." Cater allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction as the chamber began to empty. The vote was over, and the fate of Earth was sealed. In the coming days, humanity would be contained. Cater couldn't help but relish the thought. Soon, Earth would be just another cog in the vast wheel of the Galactic Council, its species subdued, controlled. As the representatives filed out, their voices still buzzing with excitement over their victory, Cater turned to leave, already composing messages to his fleet commanders. His mind was focused on the task ahead. But even as the Admiral made his way out of the chamber, something gnawed at the back of his mind. There was a strange sense of unease, a feeling he couldn't shake. He glanced back at the holographic display of Earth, its blue-green surface deceptively peaceful. The hum of the chamber's air system seemed to dull for a moment. Nothing in the galaxy was ever that quiet, unless it was hiding something nasty. But then Cater shrugged it off. It was too late to turn back now. The invasion was coming, and humanity had no idea what was about to hit them. But as the humans would teach them all too well, hindsight was always 20/20. The inevitable victory, Cater's flagship, tore through the fabric of space, its sleek, imposing form emerging from hyperspace in a burst of light. It was followed by a fleet of 10,000 ships, a perfect swarm of technological might, surrounding Earth's moon like a pack of predators closing in on their prey. The void of space, previously silent and still, was now filled with the low hum of the fleet's engines and the occasional flare of light from the ships as they aligned in their final formation. Admiral Kator, towering and confident at the helm of his flagship, stood before the massive command console, his crystalline exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh lights. His secondary arms, long and intricate, tapped with barely contained impatience against the podium, signaling his readiness for the victory he was certain would be his. His smile was wide, smug, as his eyes scanned the vast emptiness of space. "Let's savor their panic," Cater said, his voice dripping with anticipation. "No jamming communications. Let them see us coming." His words hung in the air as the fleet advanced, ships cutting through space in a perfectly coordinated formation. The Earthbound humans had no idea what was about to hit them. Or so Cater thought. Suddenly, the sensor officer's voice broke through the quiet anticipation. His words were sharp and filled with panic. "Admiral, multiple objects approaching at 0.15 light speed. Impossible!" The officer's voice trembled as he looked at the display. Cater snapped his head toward the screen, his confidence faltering for the first time. The sensor display lit up, showing objects moving at terrifying speed, a barrage of kinetic weapons, massive tungsten rods rocketing toward the fleet. Each one was like a bullet, flying faster than anything they had ever encountered. The Admiral's smile faltered as the first wave of projectiles slammed into the nearest ship. The inevitable victory shook violently. The sound of tearing metal and the blaring of alarms filled the bridge. Cater gritted his teeth and looked in horror as the first of his fleet was shredded by the high-velocity rods. His hands clenched, his mandibles clicking in disbelief. How is this possible?" Cater muttered, his voice barely a whisper of disbelief. And then the screen flickered, revealing a face. Amanda Chen, commander of Earth's Defense Force. Her smile was wide, her tone dripping with mockery as she spoke, her voice cutting through the chaos on the bridge like a blade. "Welcome to Solar System 331, she said, her voice sweet but laced with sarcasm. "I see you've met our first line of defense. Would you like to see the second?" Cater froze, his eyes wide with shock. The screen behind Chen flashed, revealing human ships decloaking from their stealth positions. They were unlike anything he had ever seen. No clear design, no standard shapes or patterns. The ships phased in and out of multiple dimensions, their hull shimmering as they appeared and vanished, like ghosts in the void. "We've had defenses in place for centuries, Admiral," Chen continued, her voice casually confident, almost as if she were speaking to a subordinate. "You've been watching us all this time, and we've been watching you." The inevitable victory rocked again, this time with an even stronger impact. Another kinetic strike hit the ship, tearing through its shields with ease. The ship groaned in protest as the crew scrambled to contain the damage. Cater's expression shifted from disbelief to outright panic. You can't have this technology," he stammered, his voice filled with desperation. How could this be? How could humans, a species he had dismissed as primitive, possess weapons like these? Chen's smile widened. "Oh, we have far more than you think," she said, her voice turning colder with each word. "And by the way, that primitive chemical rocket system you've been monitoring, it's been hiding something very advanced." Another wave of kinetic strikes pounded into the flagship, this time accompanied by human ships that shifted in and out of dimensions. The display on the bridge was a blur of flashes and destruction. Gravity beams sliced through the ships, cutting them apart with surgical precision. The flagship shuddered again as the inevitable victory was torn into pieces by the relentless onslaught. Cater watched in horror, his mind racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. His ships, built for war, were being shredded by simple kinetic weapons. His fleet, the pride of the Galactic Council, was being undone by a species he had once dismissed as insignificant. "Impossible," Cater whispered, his voice filled with disbelief as he watched his fleet crumble before him. His ships were being destroyed by objects as simple as rocks, accelerated to deadly speeds. How could they have developed such advanced technology? Chen's face appeared on the screen again, her expression calm, almost bored. "You still use fossil fuels, don't you?" she asked, her voice sharp with irony. "That's the cover we've been using for centuries. Your spies never noticed that we've had a zero-point energy infrastructure in place for decades. How could you?" Cater staggered back, his mind spinning. How had they missed this? How had they missed everything? Another volley of strikes hit, this time accompanied by human ships that phased in and out of reality. Cater's fleet was being torn apart, and he was helpless to stop it. It was over. The invasion he had so carefully planned, the conquest of a species he thought would be easy to subdue, had turned into a disaster. The humans were not the weak, primitive species he had assumed they were. They were something else, something far more dangerous. As the inevitable victory shuddered once more, Cater's mind raced. They hadn't just overestimated the humans. They had underestimated them in ways no one could have imagined. The primitives had just shown them all how far they had fallen. And in that moment, Cater knew that the battle for Earth had only just begun. The humans were not just defending themselves, they were fighting back, and they had far more to fight with than anyone had ever realized. In the heart of the EDF command center, the air is thick with anticipation. The hum of energy fills the room as Earth's most elite military minds prepare for the next phase. Captain Rodriguez stands at his station, his eyes fixed on the vast, holographic displays in front of him. Each screen flickers with data. Human ships moving into position, the jump gates the Galactic Council had relied on, now targets. His grin widens as his hands dance across the controls, excitement building within him. "Phase 2, Commander Chen. Ready for launch," he says, his voice steady but full of excitement. Through the comms, Commander Amanda Chen's voice crackles, calm and authoritative. "Phase 2 is go. Let's show them why they never stood a chance." The moment her words cut through the air, it's as if a veil has been lifted. Human ships, which had been camouflaged as ordinary asteroids drifting silently through space, now shed their disguises, revealing their true forms. The camouflage peels away in a series of sharp mechanical shifts, like pieces of armor being discarded by a war machine. These ships, with no clear aesthetic unity, look like they've been pieced together from various salvage technologies. No elegance, no grace, just pure functionality. Some are cobbled together from old wrecks, others from reverse-engineered alien tech, all mismatched and ready to fight. But while their designs may be chaotic, their movements are anything but. The ships move with precision, every one of them working in perfect sync, locked onto their targets. The Galactic Council's jump gates, the very lifeblood of the Council's power. These gates, which had been used to transport fleets across the galaxy, were now about to be turned against the Council itself. Rodriguez's fingers move quickly over the console, his eyes scanning the strategic maps on the screen. He watches as the ships approach their first target, the first jump gate now fully within range. "First target acquired. Sending our regards to the Galactic Council," he says, his voice dripping with satisfaction as his finger hovers above the firing controls. The tension in the room rises as all eyes are locked on the Karma's main weapon. The Karma, a ship unlike any the Council had ever seen, hums with an energy of its own. The weapon aboard it, a quantum energy cannon, is humanity's response to the Council's arrogance, an answer to their belief that Earth was still a primitive species. This weapon, designed to bend the very laws of physics, is about to make the Council's superior technology seem like child's play. The ship's core begins to glow, pulsing with energy. Rodriguez's fingers press a series of keys, and in an instant, the Karma's main weapon fires. The beam of quantum energy shoots out with blinding intensity, cutting across the cold expanse of space, heading straight for the first jump gate. The beam strikes with a devastating force, striking the gate's quantum field, destabilizing it. In a flash, the jump gate begins to fracture, its structure imploding under the pressure of the attack. A ripple of energy pulses out, and the gate's connection to the Galactic Council's network is disrupted, rerouting the connection in a completely unexpected direction. Instead of a route to Earth, the jump gate's path is now sent directly to the Galactic Council chambers. Rodriguez watches, his breath catching in his chest as the screen shows the jump gate's system collapsing, the energy ripple expanding as the Council's infrastructure is compromised. The impossibility of what has just occurred sinks in, and Rodriguez can't help but feel a surge of pride as the Council's greatest asset is suddenly no longer in their control. "Confirmed," Rodriguez says, his voice low with disbelief. "We've rerouted it. The jump gate's heading straight for the Council." Behind him, the EDF command staff watches in awe as their fleet moves methodically toward their next targets, knowing that they've just made history. The Council's jump gates, once their greatest asset, were now their greatest liability. Earth had turned the tide of war with a single, precise strike. The Galactic Council chamber, once the seat of supreme power, now thrummed with a strange, almost chaotic energy. The sleek, angular walls that had once symbolized the order and might of the Council now seemed to tremble in the wake of the unexpected onslaught. Holographic projections flickered erratically, streams of data scrambling across the vast display systems. The Council's fleets, previously the pinnacle of galactic military might, were being torn apart by forces they had never anticipated. Ships, once proud symbols of the galaxy's superiority, were now helplessly retreating, their advanced technology proving to be no match for humanity's unpredictable innovation. As the council representatives looked on in disbelief, Silicon Consciousness, the entity once thought to be invulnerable, was under siege. Their complex, crystalline data matrices that had run the entire council's operations now flickered with static, the once efficient systems crumbling as humanity's digital viruses infiltrated and corrupted their inner workings. The very systems that had once been the backbone of the Galactic Council were now turning against them, crumbling under the weight of Earth's ingenuity. The Silicon Consciousness representative, made entirely of swirling data and crystalline projections, glowed with frustration. Its voice, once calm and omnipotent, now crackled with panic. How did they break our systems?" it demanded, its words filled with confusion and disbelief. On the other end of the comms, Captain Rodriguez's voice came through, light and almost mocking in contrast. "We invented viruses for fun and joy," he said with a chuckle, as if it were nothing more than a simple game. The council representatives, once the embodiment of superiority, now exchanged nervous glances, realizing the magnitude of their mistake. The humans, mere primitives in their eyes, had somehow turned their own advanced technologies against them, dismantling their most trusted defenses with ease and efficiency. The inevitable victory, Admiral Ketor's flagship, had been captured, its once imposing form now reduced to a mere floating relic. The pride of the invasion fleet, which had once been a symbol of unyielding strength, now floated in space as a mockery of its former glory. It had been transformed into a floating gift shop. Human trinkets, souvenirs, and posters from Earth's most trivial cultural icons now adorned its hull. A once mighty warship was now a joke, a prison of irony. Inside the ship, Admiral Ketor himself stood before a small crowd of bewildered alien dignitaries, giving what could only be described as a lecture on humility. His towering form, still gleaming with his crystalline exoskeleton, now seemed dwarfed by the absurdity of the situation. He was no longer a conqueror, but a mocked lecturer, lecturing his former allies on something he had long dismissed as beneath him. "You see," Ketor began, his voice strained as he tried to maintain some semblance of authority. "This is a lesson in humility, one that But the absurdity of the moment wasn't lost on anyone. The chamber, which had once been filled with the weight of untouchable power, was now filled with only mockery and irony. The humiliation was complete. In the midst of this, Captain Rodriguez's voice rang out again through the comms, his tone full of sarcasm and satisfaction. "Humility. That's a new one," he said, a slight chuckle escaping his lips. "Funny, I thought you'd been teaching us that for the last few cycles. Looks like the lessons didn't stick." Ketor's jaw clenched, his mandibles twitching in discomfort. The mocking words hung in the air like a heavy weight. He tried to salvage his dignity, but the reality was undeniable. He had failed, and humanity had not just survived, they had won. As Ketor stood there, trying to keep his composure, the council members around him were forced to face the truth. Their entire strategy had crumbled in the face of an unexpected adversary. Their arrogance had blinded them to the reality that the humans, once dismissed as weak and primitive, were now the galaxy's most dangerous force. The once invincible Galactic Council had been exposed, and in its place stood a collection of defeated beings, now questioning everything they had believed in. The floodgates of humiliation were open, and there was no turning back. As the Council's proud systems faltered, the final blow came. Earth had not only survived, it had overcome. The tables had turned completely, and humanity had now become the force to be reckoned with in the galaxy. And somewhere in the background, Admiral Ketor, standing before a mocked gift shop that was once his flagship, could only wonder how it had all gone so wrong. What had started as an effort to dominate had become the greatest humiliation in the history of the galaxy. The Galactic Council chamber felt heavy with tension as the members of the Earth delegation stepped forward, their presence now a stark reminder of humanity's newfound power. At the center of the chamber stood Amanda Chen, who had once been considered just another figure in the Council's vast tapestry, but now stood as the embodiment of humanity's triumph. Her every step was measured, her gaze sharp with the weight of what Earth had just achieved. She walked to the podium, the eyes of the entire Council on her, her lips curling into a subtle smirk, knowing full well the authority that had shifted in her favor. "Let's talk terms," she began, her voice carrying across the chamber with a quiet confidence that only moments ago would have seemed unthinkable. "Earth will be recognized as a sovereign system with full defensive rights." A hologram flickered into life behind her, casting a sharp light across the room. It displayed a bold, unyielding statement. "Earth, sovereign system, full defensive rights." The words seemed to echo, not just in the chamber, but in the minds of every representative seated before her. The display shifted, showing the intricate networks of human defense systems designed to protect the planet, and an intimidating series of weaponry and advanced technology that made it clear: Earth would not be a victim. Not anymore. Amanda stood with poise, knowing the impact of her words. "Any species trying to enter Earth without authorization will face our creative defense systems," she continued, her voice steady and almost playful. "We've got a few new toys to show off." The Council representatives shifted uneasily in their seats, their discomfort palpable as the reality of their situation began to sink in. What had once been a smooth, almost routine conquest of a primitive species was now a diplomatic nightmare, a humiliation they had never expected. From across the room, Captain Rodriguez, calm, collected, and ever the observer, casually munched on popcorn, watching the scene unfold with amusement. The contrast between his laid-back demeanor and the Council's tense confusion couldn't have been more stark. Amanda's eyes briefly flickered to Rodriguez, acknowledging his casual presence in the room before turning back to the stunned representatives. She leaned slightly forward, her tone becoming more sharp as she addressed the room again. "And about those processing centers you had in mind, we're going to need those to be cultural exchange programs. You voted to enslave us. Now it's our turn." A wave of uncomfortable shifting moved through the Council. The absurdity of the situation couldn't be denied any longer. Humanity, the species they had once thought weak and subjugated, was now in control. The representatives who had once sat in their ivory towers, surrounded by unimaginable power, now found themselves in a room that seemed to close in on them, a place of uncertainty and humbling truth. Each of them, from the galactic diplomats to the high-ranking military officers, realized just how far behind they were in comparison to Earth's technological leaps. The humans had pulled ahead with such rapid innovation that it felt like the galactic powers had been left standing still. And now, they were forced to deal with the consequences. Amanda's gaze never wavered as she addressed them. "We've spent centuries on Earth creating, building, evolving. You thought you could control us, break us, and force us into submission. But you were wrong. Now Earth gets to decide what happens next. Your turn is over." The weight of her words struck the room with the finality of a hammer. The Council, whose strength once lay in their superior technology and advanced knowledge, had been thoroughly exposed. They were no longer the ones in power. Earth's influence had not only grown, it had overcome them. The holographic display behind Amanda shifted one last time, now showcasing Earth's plans for the future. New intergalactic trade routes spearheaded by human technology, embassies established across council worlds, and a new era of cooperation on Earth's terms. It was no longer a matter of negotiation. It was a matter of Earth dictating the course of the galaxy's future. And as Amanda finished her declaration, the council representatives had no choice but to sit in stunned silence, the weight of their mistakes pressing down on them. In the background, Captain Rodriguez, still snacking on his popcorn, caught Amanda's eye and gave a single nod, the unspoken understanding clear between them. Earth had won. The galaxy would never be the same again. 6 months had passed since the invasion, and the scene inside Earth's galactic embassy could not have been more different from the one the Galactic Council had once envisioned. Earth's influence had spread like wildfire, sweeping across the galaxy in ways no one had predicted. The once insignificant human species, dismissed and belittled, now stood as the center of a new galactic order. Alien species flooded Earth's trade zones, each eager to offer their most advanced technologies, hoping to gain favor in this new era of cooperation. But there was something more. These beings had come not only to trade, but to learn from the culture that had defied them. At the heart of the trade zone, Captain Rodriguez stood with a group of aliens, teaching them the essence of Earth's culinary wonders. His voice carried over the faint hum of alien chatter, his tone confident, as he casually introduced them to the concept of fast food, an integral part of human culture that had now become a global phenomenon. "So, the trick is to dip the fries in the milkshake," he said, his smile widening as he picked up a French fry and dunked it into the creamy concoction. "Trust me, you'll never look back." The aliens, their large eyes filled with disbelief, looked from the fries to Rodriguez, then at each other, trying to comprehend what they were witnessing. The idea of mixing savory and sweet was utterly foreign to them. Some made hesitant attempts, dipping the fries into the milkshake with a curious wariness, while others stared at the strange culinary experiment, unsure whether to be horrified or intrigued. The air was thick with the awkwardness of cultural shock, but there was also an undeniable fascination. In the background, alien businesses, once fiercely independent, were quickly adopting human trends. On one corner, a group of Nokia phones, now seen as retro tech, had become the newest must-have item. Memes, once a trivial distraction for humans, now adorned billboards, holographic screens, and even intergalactic advertisements. The unmistakable rhythms of K-pop echoed across the zone, blasting from speakers as aliens swayed awkwardly to the unfamiliar beats. Earth's culture, once mocked, was now something to be embraced. As Captain Rodriguez continued his cultural lesson, his laughter filled the air, his infectious enjoyment rubbing off on the group. Amanda Chen stood off to the side, watching the scene unfold with a quiet satisfaction. Her gaze lingered on the alien faces contorting in fascination and confusion as they tried to make sense of the quirks and chaos of human society. "You all could have just asked for cooperation," she said, her voice carrying a hint of playful sarcasm as she crossed her arms, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "But then, where would the fun have been?" Her words rang with the truth that only she and a handful of others truly understood. The Galactic Council had sought to dominate Earth, but in the process, they had unlocked a cultural force that even the most advanced species could not ignore. Humanity's resilience, its creativity, and its ability to adapt had reshaped the galaxy. Now, the Council representatives who had once voted to enslave Earth were now immersed in human culture, eating tacos, learning how to make memes, and even showing enthusiastic support for human sports. As the camera pans across the bustling trade zone, it becomes evident Earth was no longer just a protected system. It had become a cultural beacon, the heart of the galaxy's new order. The once powerful Galactic Council, now reduced to spectators, had no choice but to watch in awe as humanity's influence grew, not through brute force, but through the sheer power of its culture. The camera settles on a group of alien delegates, their faces lit by the glow of a holographic screen, deep in concentration, as they tried to understand the intricacies of human football. The Council, now completely fascinated by Earth's cultural export, had begun to understand something they had never even considered. True dominance didn't just come from technology or military might. It came from the ability to adapt, to share, and to make others embrace who you are. And humanity, with all its imperfections and chaos, had shown the galaxy exactly what it meant to do so. The new galactic order was here, and Earth was at its center, not through conquest, but through the undeniable force of culture. And somewhere in the background, as the laughter of aliens trying to understand human customs echoed in the air, Amanda Chen smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning of what humanity could achieve.